Stop all the troops! Here's Mother Courage! Hey, Captain! Let 'em come and buy. For they can't get from Mother Courage boots they can march in till they die. You know your men do not adore you.
Packs on their backs, lice in their hair.
But it's to death they're marching for you. And so they need good boots to wear.
Captain's awake, winter's gone. The snows depart, dead men sleep on. But you and you who still survive, get out of bed and look alive.
You know, it's very seductive when you're sitting in your, we call this some people call this our library and some people call it our television room. Since we haven't turned the television on in here in about 2 years, I guess it's more the library. But it looks very much like wherever you are. You're in upstate New York still?
That's right. I'm in our lovely Victorian home here. You can see I've got a lovely Victorian lamp behind me. I'm in my den here. So it's very nice, kind of rather isolated, but and it's snowing outside right now.
It's snowing in Pittsburgh too.
Oh, it is. Oh, well, all right. So I don't feel particularly abused then.
No. Yesterday I was down on my hands and knees in the garden getting all the, the various refuge under bushes and things that you never get around to. And today I'm just sitting here with my LL Bean winter sweater.
Right.
I want to just move us just slightly ahead, but I do want to keep this just as, it's a conversation. And,
okay, fine.
And I love, I was a big fan of the old days of Washington Week and with Washington Week in Review, when they have these brilliant old school reporters who they all knew everything that happened. And so they would just, they'd correct people and ask things. And now they've gotten into that format where I know you're busy, so you just do your 5-minute spot about this, and then we'll move on to somebody else, and you'll be off the hook. So I like the interplay and going back and forth. But I do want to just say for anybody who doesn't know that this is Marvin Carlson, who I've known for many years and is as responsible for anyone of my spending as much time looking at German theater as I have these last 10 years about it. Not 2009 was the first time that I went at your suggestion. And it's just been, a marvelous eye-opening experience for me. I took along, it was either that trip or maybe it was my second trip, your book on contemporary German directors. Theater is More Beautiful Than War. Maybe you could just say, where did you get that title from?
Well, it's on there's a poster that I have hanging in my office, and it is the title on the poster. Actually, the poster is a wonderful, rather expressionistic poster, and the play is the Piccolomini, one of Schiller's Wallenstein trilogy, and there's a kind of expressionistic picture of a group of soldiers, kind of in a sort of tilted expressionistic phalanx, and the line is a line out of the play. Theater is More Beautiful Than War, and it seemed to me it's good for that play, but it seemed to be a perfect title for the book because, of course, the modern German theater comes out of the war, and in a way is a affirmation of that, the cultural side of of Germany that the Germans were very interested in reestablishing after the fascist period. So it has a lot of reverberations to it.
Yeah, so you know what's been, speaking just of reestablishing things, that it seemed like for a while all those duplicate theaters that they built in West Berlin, because all the other companies were on the other side of the wall.
Right.
Have many of those come back to life? Because
Well, not very many actually. The main theater in the West was the Schiller Theater. That became the sort of alternative to the old Deutsches Theater, and they used it for a while for festivals and so on. It's almost never used now. It's kind of fallen apart, and
I walked by there once, and it was just a mess. I mean,
it doesn't amount to anything. And then while Berlin was divided, they one of the first attempts of the new West Berlin government to really put themselves on the map was to bring Peter Stein and his company into Berlin, and give them an old kind of warehouse building, which was the Schaubühne Hollische Ufer, which is still there as an experimental place. So that theater is still operating, though
that's Theater How now, right?
Yes,
How?
that's right. It's I forget, there are three different How theaters. That's one. I think that's How 2 or How 3. The Hebel is How 1. Yeah, so that still exists. But Stein's company then, which was a few years later given their own theater, which was a completely rebuilt old movie palace, which is now the Schaubühne am Leniner Platz. Which is now one of the big main 2 or 3 theaters in Berlin. But that was not operating. I mean, that was opened during the division. So I'm trying to think. Well, of course, there are a few old theaters in the West that were there before. Max Reinhardt's old theaters on the Kurfürstendamm. There are 2 or 3 theaters. You and I never go there, Jim, because what they're doing is kind of boulevard entertainment.
I know. I've been by it on the U-Bahn, and you see.
Right. I've gone 3 or 4 times. I once went to see a production of Importance of Being Earnest. They do that kind of thing. And in fact, the first time I believe that anybody ever did the musical Cabaret in Berlin was in one of those theaters. And they had a wonderful production of it. Really played on the fact of where they were. But Cabaret is not a musical the Germans know, strangely enough.
That's interesting.
I remember some years ago I was having lunch with my old friend Erika Fischer-Lichte in Berlin, and she said, "So I know you go to the theater every night, Marvin. Where are you going tonight?" And I said, "Oh, I'm really looking forward to this on the Theater am Kurfürstendamm. They're doing Cabaret." And Erika said, "They're doing a cabaret?" And I said, no, they're doing the musical Cabaret. She said, "What's that?" Now, this is the leading theater scholar in Berlin. Wow. She'd never heard of that musical, which I was quite surprised at, though I recently found that the Germans don't really, recently, the last 10 years or so, or maybe even a little more than that, they've begun to become conscious of American musicals. But it still is a kind of an alien form to them.
It's very fascinating. I think there was a production of Cabaret that was either on or was about to open the last time that I was in Berlin, which was right before we went to China.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I don't know how prominent. I just saw posters for it, down in.
Do you happen to remember what theater was doing it?
No, it wasn't a theater I was familiar with.
No.
But it was. That is kind of interesting. And have you seen Babylon Berlin?
No, I haven't. where's that?
Oh, that's it's a it was a German like what would you say, a German soap opera kind of. It deals with Berlin just before the rise of the Nazis. It starts out at 1929 because the opening of Three Penny Opera is there's a murder about to happen there, and it's very well done. There's a lot of very prominent German actors who are in it. Lars Eidinger is playing someone who kind of been in the background, but you know he's going to be a major crook coming up, and I highly recommend it. You can watch it. You know, well, I think they have it even. You wouldn't want to do this, but they have it with voiceovers. But it's much better if you just watch it in the German or watch the subtitles.
Is it on YouTube or somewhere?
I believe it's on Netflix.
Netflix.
Yeah. Matt, do you happen to know?
I'm making a note of it.
Okay, but I really, really do like it a lot. I think because it so much speaks to that. You go, well, this is just. In fact, when I heard about it on NPR, they were doing a feature on it, and they said this show is cabaret on steroids.
Oh, well, I love cabaret. I directed it once. It's one of my favorite pieces. So, and it's one of the few pieces that I know where the film version is as good as the stage version in its own way.
There's some very striking images, like when they do the pullback when the boy is singing "This Tomorrow Belongs to Me," or
right.
It really does capture. It's kind of Brechtian in that way. You think you're in one world, and all of a sudden
it really is. And they the way they do the montage allows them to make the parallel between the musical numbers and the main plot rather even clearer than it is in the stage version. But I love them both. They're wonderful.
I wanted to ask you about this. Are you familiar with this?
No, Mackie Messer. I mean, I know Mackie Messer, of course, but I don't know the book.
This is what you're talking. It's a film about.
Oh, it's a film.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can see it, but Lars plays Brecht in it.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Lars is one of my favorite actors. He's just marvelous.
Oh, he is. He's like, well, the first time that Barbara and I saw him was on that very first trip. And we had picked out all our tickets in advance, and we saw several things at the Schaubühne, and we saw quite a good Mother Courage at the Berliner Ensemble. But on Christmas night, we had spent the day mostly outside. We'd been to a Christmas market, and then we had, I forgot what museum we went to, and we went down to see the East Side Wall, which is for people that don't know, it's part of it's the wall that's still standing. And over the years, artists, and were they commissioned or but there's all these murals that they have painted very.
I think eventually, I think there was some money went into it, but I believe the artist just sort of colonized it, and then the politicians got interested in it later.
Yeah, no. Well, there was so much of that in East Berlin. There was the one building that, according to the East German records, the corrupt records, that the building had been torn down. And so people moved into it, and they said, you have to get out. And they say, no, there's no building here. And if being German, they said, well, I guess you're right. It's not in the records. Which is, it was up near Orangen. But just in the Mitte. It was just a wonderful old building. I think it actually has been torn down since then at some point.
This is probably this sounds like Kreuzberg. Is it in that part of the city? Or
no, this is right in the Mitte near the old synagogue that they
oh yes, right.
Yeah.
That's another wonderful old building. Really incredible. I think I'm not sure the first time I saw Eidinger, although I've seen him in so many things, but the first one which really kind of blew me away was Ostermeyer's Midsummer Night's Dream, his rock version of that. You ever see that?
Yes.
Well, okay. You remember Lars played a kind of cabaret MC, transgender in that, as he was Puck in that.
Yeah,
and it was quite over the top, but his range is just incredible.
Oh, no, and his athleticism. I remember it's in my mind, there was some point where it had a balcony that made you think of what was that old Marx Brothers movie, Room Service? And
Oh
he was
yes,
running
right.
around the balcony, and they had these bungee cords out over the stage, and all of a sudden he just leapt off the balcony and it sprung down to the stage, and he got off. And it just seemed like he was always up to something like that.
It's you saw his Richard III, I
Oh,
imagine.
I've seen that 3 times, I
Oh
think.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful, and that really shows something of his both his physical and his dramatic range, I think.
I, you
Uh,
know, I was just going to say that the thing about Lars, which you really got me rethinking the whole notion of alienation, is that, and the thinking of it as an interruption rather than a standing back, how it's changing your perspective, and
mm-hmm.
the way that that Lars and I've been to some of the classes at Ernst Busch, the big theater training school,
Right.
and I was a couple of years ago. Barbara and I were doing a festival in Florence, and they had students and teachers from some of the top European theater schools, and they would do extended workshops with all of the students. There'd be some from Carnegie Mellon, that was the only American school, and then they would show you an example of the students' work, and they were doing one exercise, which was it was a German exercise, completely about being in 3 different realities, or 3 different, like you'd be walking someplace, then give a command and you had to jump up in the air, and something else, you had to go down. So you're trying to play a through line going through of just a physical through line, constantly being adjusted, but then having to come right back to it. And there was a wonderful theater school from Belgium, which was very legato in all their training. They were just so beautifully, but they could not do that exercise at all. They would just start tripping over each other, and it was just really, really fascinating. But watching the exercises that the Germans particularly put together, and then you would see things like, I think of Lars's Hamlet, which I think I've seen the most. Maybe I've seen that 5 or 6 times, and about how he could be so engaged with something that's happening on stage, and then notice someone in the audience, and immediately, when in fact Terry. I wasn't there the night that Terry went, that we had sent him, but our friend Peter Kleinert had gotten Barbara and me tickets for something else, and we'd already seen that a couple of times. But he was doing a speech in Hamlet, and all of a sudden he sees Terry doing something, and he's about 2/3 of the way back in the in the stalls, and he says, "You," and Terry goes, "What?" And he knew he was looking at him, and he said, "Stand up." and, and he starts speaking to him in German, and Terry says, "I don't understand German." He goes, "You don't understand German?" He's out. No, I mean it, out of the theater. And Terry's going, no, please, I don't want to go. I'm enjoying. All right, you can stay. And there was another performance, and some of these things, well, you think they're bits, but they don't repeat themselves. Like there was another one he did where, if you remember, he had this paper crown on, like kids get at Burger King or something, and there was somebody else that he stopped them. He said, "Hello, who are you?" And the man said, "Well, I'm from Denmark." And Lars said, "You're from Denmark?" And he went, "I'm from Denmark." And he went out into the audience and gave the guy his crown, but then he would come right back up, and as if it had just been 2 films cut together. He'd be right exactly back into where he was without missing anything. And he was, so I said we saw him do the first Hamlet on Christmas night. And then after we'd seen him for a while, and he was doing a Measure for Measure that Peter Kleinert was the dramaturg on. And so, and I love how in the German cafes that everybody kind of mingles, or often before.
Right. Yes.
So we were having, a sandwich and a beer or something, and all of a sudden, Lars is walking through, and Barbara just, has this biggest fan crush on. Well, we both do, I think, but and just, oh my God! And I said, "Look, he's right there. Just say how much you like him." And he was so thrilled, and he said, "Well, how do you know?" And Barbara said, "Well, I've worked with Peter Kleinert." And he said, "Oh, Peter Kleinert, he was my teacher, and he's the dramaturg." He said, "Yes, we know." So after the show, two of Barbara's students, they had just gotten to Berlin, and we said, you have to go and see this. And so then we were seeing something in one of the other Schaubühne theaters, and they came out and they were just raving about how good, Lars was. And so we went over, we were getting a beer and talking to the students, and all of a sudden we hear this voice behind us, and he goes, "Hello, Barbara, how did you like it tonight?"
Wonderful.
And so they turned around, and then she said, "Oh, and who are these people?" And so Barbara gets to introduce the two students to Lars as if they're best friends. And then we were going off because we were talking about finishing up Peter's contract for coming over to Irondale. And we didn't know what happened to the kids, but we saw them the next day, and they said, "Oh, Lars took us out for beers, and we talked about theater until midnight." So that's that kind of the way he's so open about everything, and he's really, his Brecht is really wonderful, and the way the film is set up. I mean, it follows a production of Threepenny Opera through, and I think it's just brilliantly staged, and the orchestra is so good. You're hearing parts in it that you don't normally hear because, they have an orchestra that's good doing music like that. But then the sort of the frame story is about Brecht trying to get the film on.
Oh,
And all the problems he had, especially when the U.S. money pulled out, because of this is 1930 when all this was happening. And so you get this sense of, like Brecht he's showing the money people, like, now this is where we're going to do this and how he's going to open it up. And then it will cut to a lot of it's filmed at the Berliner Ensemble, just right on the stage. So that sense of what the original production was like, you get this very wonderfully choreographed and sung, best second act finale that I've ever seen, which again has that double thing that's going on in it, just beautifully done. So I really do. I highly recommend that.
Well, yeah, let me make a note about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to order it from Berlin. But the film director, I don't know him, is Joachim Lang. Do you know him?
Who?
Joachim Lang.
The name is familiar, but I can't place him. Yeah.
No, and the actor, Lars is the only actor in it that I know. But he said he wants to spend more time on his film career, right? And so he's only going to do, this is before the pandemic came in. So he said, "I'm only going to do 5 productions with the Schaubühne this year."
I wish I had this exact citation. Maybe I could find it somewhere. But there was, I don't know, this must be 10 or 15 years ago. There was a big featured story when Lars was really just becoming prominent. I think he maybe even won the Best Actor of the Year award that year from Theater Heute. And Theater Heute had a big article, and maybe you've seen it. But well, it's worth looking up if you can, because the piece has a lot of good stuff in it. But it starts out with this wonderful picture of Lars from the waist up, naked, a la Putin, and he's a great. It's a great beefcake picture. He's a great physical specimen, and across his naked chest, he has written "Mutter." It's just a wonderful little piece.
Aside from those early Ibsens, the Nora and the Hedda that he was in.
Yes, right.
I don't think I've ever seen him on stage when he wasn't naked at some point.
Well, that's. I think I've often said that I think the best symbolic use of nudity that I have ever seen was Lars and Richard III.
Yeah.
Where nobody has ever figured out how to do the Lady Anne scene successfully.
Yeah.
And your first thought to do it in the nude, you think, well, that makes everything worse. But in fact, it's really quite brilliant because, of course, when he's nude, you realize the hump is just. We see the hump is fake.
Yeah.
And it works on so many levels that suddenly she sees. I'm not talking just sexually, but partly that. No. She sees this is a man. This isn't a distorted humpback. This is, and to somehow make make that work. I was just blown away. I thought that was a. You're right. He was. I think he certainly has frequently been in the news. But he's he's a wonderful person. I was on a panel with him once, and his ability to, well, you know this already, but to just sort of deal with theoretical questions about theater and about acting. He's really, of course, something that always impresses me about continental Europeans in general, and Germans in particular, is how articulate they are.
Yes.
I mean, they think about what they're doing. They read. I mean, I first ran into this with the French, and I thought, oh well, that's the French. But you know, you talk about. I mean, talk about the same people that your students are talking about, Hans Tace Lehmann or somebody like that. They've all read him. They know about this. They've been through these discussions. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that if you start as a person in the professional directing community in New York City, start going around and talking to other professional directors, many of them sort of make a point of being anti-intellectual.
Yeah.
They don't read anything. I mean, somebody like Richard Foreman stands out because he's so he's so in your face about. Look, I read stuff, I think about it, but it's not common. And as I say, there are a lot of people who I remember once having an argument with Joanne Akelitis, whose work I loved, who essentially was telling me, look, you can't read too much, it destroys your mind. You really have to go from the gut. I mean, I thought, oh God, I could understand this if it were coming from, I don't know. Well, I won't mention any names. But Joanne, I had always sort of pegged as, well, she thinks a lot. I mean, and I'm sure she does. But I think she feels she somehow needs to take that sort of corrupt neo-romantic position.
That makes sense. You know, I always felt that the work that I saw of hers, that she was trying to do a European production where she would be allowed 15 or 16 weeks, but we only got to see the sketch that had to go up after week 5.
I think that's often true. Yeah.
But I so admired her ambition, and I liked a lot of when she took over the public theater after Pap.
Yes.
For one thing, she made it, I thought, a very welcoming space. I mean, it was much more, kind of reminded me of the European theaters where you go, maybe which one you prefer hanging out in the lobby in, because there are so many of them are so wonderful. When we're in London, I always say, well, our club is the long bar at the National. You go in there in the afternoon and you get a book until it's time to go to a show, because it's just so wonderful.
Yeah, that is great. Yeah.
I was going back and I was looking over, your other book that I know well, The 10,000 Nights.
Oh yes.
And when I was doing my research for Our Mother Courage, I kept coming across references from the Jerome Robbins, Anne Bancroft Mother Courage. And all the pieces seemed like, and Gene Wilder, like that should have been a really wonderful play. And but then what you talked about, could you talk about that a little bit, what you write about in the book about the problem they had economically with having to take the songs out?
Yeah, well, there were many problems with that production. I mean, I as an actress, I like Anne Bancroft, though I honestly don't think she had a clue what that play was, or what Brecht was trying to do. God, I don't know how many Mother Courages I've seen, but she ranks near the bottom in terms of sort of getting through it. I saw Helena Weigel as Mother Courage,
I've only seen a film of that. Yeah.
which was of course the real. Though I have to say that in a way, because I saw her at the Berliner Ensemble,
Mhm.
it was the aura of seeing her there was so much that I don't know that I was capable of judging it objectively. I just thought, as I was in it, I was thinking, "Oh, this is one of the great experiences of my life." I'm not sure it really was, but I couldn't avoid that.
Yeah.
You've been in the Berliner Ensemble, just the theater itself,
Oh, I know.
wonderful old Baroque surroundings is incredible. Anyway, back to Bancroft. Well, the they didn't. I guess at the very beginning, they really didn't have any idea of how to get hold of epic theater. I mean,
Yeah.
that from the director on down, none of them had any idea. And I don't know if they had any guidance. I can't even say they were acting in different styles. They were all acting as though they were doing the miracle worker. I mean, it was, and it just, what they did, Jim, was, and when they started out, I thought, oh, maybe it's all right. It's a little heavy-handed, but okay. When we came in, the curtain was already up. Of course, the set was visible, and so on. And there was music playing. The music stopped, and Anne and all the others came in and lined up on the front of the stage. And they introduced themselves. I'm Anne Bancroft, and you've seen me in such and so and so and so. And I thought, oh well, all right. This is not very exciting, but I get the point. But that was the end of it. Yeah. Then we went right into the miracle work.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it just they tried very hard. They worked to. Of course, everything they tried to do, which was emotionally engage us, was exactly, of course, what Brecht does not want them to do, as you well know. And and they were working so hard at it. And to be fair, I would have to say the audience didn't help them either, because the audience also did not know what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
And it was just Eric Bentley, who I have very mixed feelings about. I mean, I think he, on the one hand, he probably did more to get Brecht introduced to this country than any other living human being, and on the other hand, it was the wrong Brecht. So, I mean, what can I say? But he was sitting in a side balcony, sort of like the master. Well, anyway, you mentioned about the commercialism. Well, that was very much the idea that it was very much sold as, well, all right. If you're really going to be with contemporary theater, this is something you've got to go see. At that time, nobody knew, well, almost nobody knew anything about Brecht except Threepenny Opera down in the village. And that had been, of course, a huge success. It run for a long time.
Yeah, like 7 years or something.
It may have even still been running at that time. Yeah. Most people knew Brecht only through that. And coming to this bizarre production, thinking you were going to see something like Threepenny Opera, that worked against it too. Yeah. So, Anne Bancroft was a bad choice, but I talk about that. I mean, she was a very hot property at that time, one of the 2 or 3 most popular actresses in New York. So it seemed like it was sort of like when they decided to do Threepenny Opera on Broadway and did Sting as the I mean, what can I say?
That was part of Stefan's campaign to make Brecht, New York Brecht free, so he could drive up the royalties.
Nobody heard that. He doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, well, no. We for like 5 years we were not allowed to do a Brecht play.
Is that true?
Since he died, the Brecht estate and the lawyers have been absolutely marvelous. They, have
It's interesting. I never knew that. Now,
they were
doesn't
so
surprise
excited
me.
about this radio version because, I think his granddaughter, was talking about, this, her grandfather doing radio versions and things of some of the earlier the St. Joan of the Stockyards that they did right before he left Berlin. And but they've just been amazingly
Well,
helpful.
Jim, when did Irondale start doing Brecht? You've done so much of him.
Um,
When did that start?
the first one we did was in the spring of 1984, at the end of our very first season.
Oh, that's quite a ways back. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we did a Galileo the next year. And we were so looking at improvisation, and I mean, in the Spolin sense. And Paul Sills had spent a Fulbright in Berlin looking at the work there. So I think as he was adapting things, there's just so much stuff that you go, that's what it is. But to get all the layers of how it works, I feel like, with this Mother Courage is the first time that I've really figured out how it all works. And part of it was just being able to read the German well enough that I'm going, oh, that doesn't sound right. You go and look, well, in German, it's just this. That's a very funny line. Why don't they? Because there's so much humor in the play. And then he just flips you. And did I send you the finished version of our radio Mother Courage yet?
No, and I would love to read it. Yeah.
Oh, no, I have it on. I have the radio show recording. I'll send you both when we get finished.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I thought I'd send it to you, but I'm sorry that I didn't. I'm really curious. Even if you just absolutely despise it, I had so much fun doing it and discovered so many wonderful things. And yeah, I heard Jeff London, who does a lot of the culture things on NPR. We were trying to figure out stuff to do because this was going to be the final leg of this Brecht in Exile project. And that was about, I think, last June. And I heard him interviewing Alan Ayckbourn. And talking about and everybody but that point was doing these Zoom, film things.
Right.
I hate them. I feel like I'm always watching a bad Swedish movie. I understand. And so what he had done, because he had started, I didn't know this, Ayckbourn had started out in radio. And so he pulled out, I think, one of the scripts that he had done, and he and his wife did it in their little radio studio in their basement. And she played like 9 parts and he did the other ones. And Jeff didn't have the whole piece, but he had some of the stuff. And I thought, this is really marvelous. And we had gotten to know Jeff a bit through the Police Project. He did a feature on us. So Terry and I called him up and said, well, could we just pick your brains about this? And we talked to him, and he said, well, any way that I can be helpful. In fact, I've got a studio right here in my house. So if you want me to help with the editing. And we said, well, you can tell us how to do it for one thing, and it was crazy how it went. But we started working on it. Well, I've been working on the adaptation, which I'm also curious just what you think about that. But because I wanted to make it as actable as possible. And I feel like so many of the other adaptations, and I won't get into a lot of other people's names, but they kind of fall into that same trap that you're talking about, where they either fall in love with the poetry or there's something that there is saying, as opposed to, like if you look at that first scene, it's a very, very funny scene until that very end, when all of a sudden it gets serious for a moment. Did you see there was a Mother Courage in Vienna? We saw it, I think, about maybe 6 years ago, and I don't remember who the actress was, but she was a very young Mother Courage and played it. Oh, what would you say? That as if she were the whole team was a gypsy crew. And so they were just they came in and much more slightly lower than you'd think they'd be on that first number. And she's like the guy in The Music Man, coming out and going, "Here, everybody." And they kind of, as the crowd gathers and she starts singing, and all of a sudden Ilov goes around and he finds a pole and he starts really beating this great thing on the pole. So this whole number emerges from nothing to this wonderfully big thing. And of course, that was at the Berg has so much, their budget is just enormous. So there would be places where the theatricality, they would have like when some of those journeys where the cart's moving along and all of a sudden there'd be graves coming up out of the floor.
Oh,
And I don't, and it's also something, and I always have trouble with how the end plays. Have you seen something where the death of Katrin does what it is supposed to do by how the impression of it? It just always, I can think a lot of reasons why it doesn't work, but
yeah, it's really tough. Yeah, I'm not sure. It always has an emotional punch, but it doesn't really quite take you as far as you need to go at that point. I'm not sure what you would have to do to it.
What Jeff and I agreed on is that you can't play the drum real. It starts, and on radio, it's easier to do that. So it starts out real, and then all of a sudden, there's sheer will of Katrin turns it into this instrument that is vibrating, through the hills. And so it really, so you understand what they're so upset about, as opposed to, all that little girl's up there playing a drum. She can't wake up the village.
Yeah.
And that was a big clue of just seeing how that punched up. And then from discovering that, we were able, with the advantage of the radio stuff, to go back and say, realistically, there would be a pause here, but let's take that pause out and have them thinking really quickly. And all of a sudden that changed the whole style of how it played.
Oh, that's interesting. So you go just right directly on into the next action then.
Yeah. And again, I would just love to have a much more extended conversation with. It's funny, as long as I've known you, and I've gone all the way to China with you, and this is the first time we've been able to talk nonstop for, what did we talk like 40 minutes? I'm having the best time ever. So
well, that's great. One of the things that both you and I love about the German theater is that it provides just inexhaustible subjects to talk about.
Yeah.
There's so much there, and so much. Not only so much thought has gone into it on the artistic side, which is so impressive, but even more important, really, is that I'm a great fan of theater building upon itself. I mean, you know my book, The Haunted Stage. That is, when you go into a theater, all the stuff that comes back that you've connected with before. And I feel that so much more strongly in the German theater. That is, everybody in the audience goes to the theater all the time.
Yeah.
Or, and
if you dirty look, if you sit too much in your seat.
Right. I mean, I go into I don't know, the Martin Beck Theater or even the Public Theater. Less so, I must say, at the Metropolitan Playhouse or at Irondale, because you do have a sort of cadre audience that comes back in some cases for decades, but certainly for, and they are, on the whole, if they're going to make the trip out to the wilds of Brooklyn anyway, that means they go around to places. Obviously, they go to BAM and they go to other things. But I don't feel that at BAM. In fact, there is a certain, as you know, there's a BAM audience that sees themselves as the cutting edge of the American theater, but in fact, they don't bring the kind of experience and sophistication that a normal theater goer in Berlin will.
Yeah.
They have. I mean, if you go to a show at the Schaubühne, most of the audience, I mean, there'll be a few tourists, of course, but most of the audience members will be people. If you speak to them about the intermission, say, well, this is all very interesting. What do you think about this thing at the Berliner Ensemble or at the Hebel? They've gone. They know. And they've done this for years. And that is, you can't. The regular theater goer in Berlin could have a conversation like you and I are having with the same kind of references and the assumption that, well, sure, Lars Oettinger, I can remember what he did in this. I can't do that with a standard person at the public theater.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? And so part of the joy of the German theater is that sophisticated audience, not just sophisticated about philosophy or dramatic theory or whatever, but performance sophisticated. They've seen a lot of very good, very interesting theater, and they contextualize it that way. And as a theater culture, we just don't do that, and I really value that. It's one of the things that keeps me going to the German theater, and the German theater, of course, itself keeps feeding that. Somebody like Heidegger, somebody like Ostermeyer, they know that's true of their public, and they're addressing that public. They're not addressing the tourists or whatever. That may keep them in business, but that's not.
Right. And they're doing more and more performances now with English subtitles.
Yes.
And I think also with the amount of touring that I don't know why doesn't the Deutsches, I mean, the Schaubühne feel like they're out in another country every week, but some of the other ones don't. And as far as just the level of the acting, I think the Deutsches theater is the best acting.
Oh, I think so too. And I think on the whole, I think that's been true for many years. They're different directors, different designers, and move around a bit. But just for just sort of solid predictability, I think the Deutsches is what you'd have to pick.
And I also love how there have been productions, because often I'd say, what have you seen that's interesting? And you told me about this Godot that they did. I think it's been in the rep for 15 years, that I finally got to see about 3 years ago. And the the main guys are much older now, but they were just incredible. Right. It was like, watching Bert Lahr and somebody coming out. They can do all the shtick, but they can do anything you want them to do. They're just so amazing.
Right. Yeah. It's well, of course it really does depend, and a great deal, of course, always depends on who the intendant is and what sort of focus they have, and so on. There have been times that in recent years when I've said, well, I always start to see what the Schaubühne is doing, and then I'll go on to the Deutsches and Berliner Ensemble and others. And of course, back at right at the turn of the century, you had to start with the Volksbühne and Castorp and his crowd. And they've followed.
That's kind of gone back. I know Castorp seems to be working more and more at the Berliner Ensemble, but they threw out the person they brought in from London.
Oh, well, that Jim, as I'm sure you know, that was a very bizarre idea. Although you can see why they would do it. Although you would think the German powers that be would know better. What they brought in this Canadian entrepreneur who and had the idea that he would come in and make this a kind of God knows what, a sort of an international exposure to the hot new stuff wherever it was.
Right, like a presenting house. Well, kind of the way
presenting house, exactly. Yeah. And it's the kind of decision that a thoughtful businessman would make, but not a theater, not an artist. And of course, everybody in Berlin was appalled in the theater world, and as you say, it was a disaster. I don't know what's going on there now. Do you know what? The
last I heard was, and I can't think of what his name is, but he was someone who had been Castorp's second, and I guess they didn't want to. And Castorp is doing a lot of work at the Berliner Ensemble now, of course.
Yes, right.
His Galileo, did you?
I didn't see his Galileo. I saw his. He did a Dostoevsky piece there that I saw. But I
at the Berliner Ensemble.
Yes, at the Berliner Ensemble.
No, I saw the non-musical Les Mis.
Oh, I didn't see that. Was it any good?
Well, it was almost 6 hours long.
Yeah, they always are.
And the one German review that I said, well, some of it's not very good, but it's 6 hours long. What do you expect? You got to take all this different stuff that comes along. And he wedded some other play onto the beginning of it, which I didn't know. But I guess there's kind of a joke when Castorf inserts all these things. You're trying to figure out exactly what these pieces are that he puts into things. But
yeah, well, he's done that for a long time, just throwing in a hunk of something else, not even necessarily dramatic. It might be a philosophic essay or a short story, God knows what.
He threw chickens at us one night at the Volksbühne.
You what?
He threw live chickens at us.
I'm sorry, I still didn't.
I say he threw live chickens at us.
Oh, he did. Oh, yeah, well, all right. Well,
and there was a horse that when he made his entrance, obviously he'd been massaged backstage because he had the most enormous erection that I've ever seen. Just the thing that sounds like, oh, this is good, but somehow he weaves it all together, so his outrage becomes a part of the.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen any of the productions of Vinge and Miller?
No.
Oh, they're the out. They haven't done anything in a few years, but they back in, this must have been the mid '90s. They did a series of totally outrageous productions in Berlin, and they were a very hot item at that time. And in a way, they sort of took Castorf and went further. That is, shows that ran 2 or 3 days, and live chickens and insulting the audience and tearing up the furniture and all that sort of stuff.
It's interesting that you just said that about taking Castorf and going further, or at least going in a different direction. But I feel like without Castorf, Ostermeyer wouldn't be there.
No. Although Ostermeyer was shocking in his own way, because he was the one who brought, his first big success was Shopping and Fucking.
Right. Yeah.
And he was, and that was considered really an eye opener, but not because he did anything outrageous. It's just because of the sort of gritty realism of it, which was not really news to the. But I remember when he first went to the Schaubühne, he started out with something that I didn't see, but it was like the Bluebird. I mean, it was.
Yes, that's right. Majorlink. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was totally. And I didn't see it, but yeah, he had that reputation, and you'll remember that. I don't know that I could agree with you. Castorf doesn't do this sort of thing. He does it in his own way. That is, think about Torvald in the fish tank in Nora, shooting and falling into the fish tank.
Right. Yes.
That isn't exactly a Castorf trick, but it is in that realm of, I'm going to really surprise you with some outrageous, but still, I mean, it works very well. It's symbolic.
I thought it was absolutely brilliant and stunning, and of course, that's what would happen today. And my friend that I took that night, who had been enjoying it up until that moment, was kicking trash cans over, going out like, why did you wreck the play doing that? I said, well, I don't think in this day and age, if Nora just walked out, that would be much of a fuss.
Yeah.
People don't know, again, that Nora kills him at the end of this version. And that last image when they spun the set around, so you just saw her outside and all this.
And she's out there.
Oh my God, now what?
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, in a way, you could say that he gets this from Castorf, but I'm only thinking of the fact that Castorf is the one who really, he and his designer Bert Neumann invented this idea of, let's turn the set around and see what's going on in the other room.
Yeah.
They really made that a kind of signature thing. And if you think about it, I think, I love that ending. I think it's just brilliant. to take it
It's
around.
great, you know,
You
what,
remember?
go ahead. Well, so what they did with Hedda.
That's exactly where I was.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that he uses a similar and I think even more stunning, where we see it go around, and Hedda has of course killed herself. But what is so brilliant about that is that it keeps going, and we go back and we see they don't know. It hasn't made any difference to them. They go right ahead.
No,
We never see them discover Hedda.
You always think they're going to get out the door, and they don't. And the Beach Boys are playing the whole time.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. I would have to say that I know it's you have to admire Kastorf, but
Yeah.
I don't like Kastorf very much.
I would totally agree with you about that. You know, that
Oscar Mayer is much. Yeah. I enjoy far more.
Yeah.
But
the
turntable stuff reminds me of another thing that Kastorf did a lot that really was innovative, although everybody does it now, and that is mixing live video with the performance. I mean, he was a real pioneer there, and also using video. Ivo van Hove and other people do this now.
Oh, yeah.
Taking the video camera backstage so that we see something else that's going on somewhere else. It really was Kastorf that invented that technique, and I think that was a tremendous contribution.
It's interesting how Van Hove, that his reputation has become so enormous compared to either Kastorf or to Ostermeyer.
Well, you touch a sensitive spot there, Jim. I think that I have enjoyed a lot of Van Hove's work. Mm-hmm. Almost everything I enjoy, I say, oh yes, but some German did that 10 years ago and did it rather better.
Yeah.
And so I sort of overreact. I find it hard to give Van Hove as much credit as he probably deserves, because I feel he's been oversold in the United States. Do
you have a favorite of his pieces, of Van Hove?
What's that?
Did you have a favorite of the ones that you've seen?
Of the Van Hove pieces?
Yeah.
Oh, let me think just a moment. Yes, the Hedda. I liked his Hedda Gobbler a lot.
Yeah.
And again, it was very German, very. Did you see that production at the New York?
No, I didn't. Wish I had. I'm thinking of the Hedda, but I didn't see that. The one I was most partial to was the Arthur Miller, View from the Bridge.
Oh yes, that was very good. That was very good.
Down.
You're right. In a way, that was better than the Hedda in that there was less sort of in your face experimentation.
Yeah, no, I thought that was just brilliant.
Yeah, that was very good. The whole everything about it was good. The design was brilliant.
Yeah.
That the way they used that box and the relationships. But I think that Jim, that was, of all of the Van Hoves that I've seen, that was the most. I don't want to quite say subdued, but let's say controlled.
No, it was absolutely
that there was.
Yeah,
there was kind of a quality about a lot of his work I'll shake you up on this. I'm doing Molière, so I'll bring in garbage bags off the street.
Yeah, no, exactly. That there was a lack. There was a discipline in that. Somebody said it was because David Land, was he the man who was running the Young Vic, and he just left there a little while ago?
I believe you're right. Yeah,
but he had a strong foundation in Greek drama, and that he really influenced that production.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but it's
Okay, I have one more thing I wanted to ask you before we have to end this up. I'm told that with a podcast like this, that an hour is what people
Oh,
can.
all right.
Okay.
No,
No. I could sit here for another half an hour. Maybe we'll do it a regular show. It'll be the Jim and Marvin show.
fine. Go
But
ahead.
you're getting ready to move on to some new horizons here. Do you have any plans for what you're doing after CUNY?
After which, after the
Yeah, after the grad center,
uh,
new adventure.
well, as you know, I now have a center in Shanghai, and
Yeah,
I'm going to be doing more work with them.
yeah.
So that's one big thing. I I can't, and indeed, I have promised. I've been making New Year's resolutions for about 3 or 4 years now that I'm going to learn Mandarin, and
Oh.
never had the guts to go at it, to be honest.
Have you
And
tried
then
Duolingo?
when
Yeah,
COVID hit, I thought this is it.
yeah. Uh-huh.
So I spend a couple hours every morning doing Mandarin now.
Oh,
And after a year, I'd say I made a little progress. Boy, this is hard.
oh.
It really
Well,
is hard.
what program are you using to do that?
What? Well,
What-
I have. Let's see. I have two programs. One is and they're very good. I'm not sure I can remember the name of either one of them. I'm happy to send it to you.
Sure.
What I basically do. Well, I also have just some Chinese text that I just dip into every so often to
Yeah.
see how more can I manage it. Just sort of day to day working. I go back and forth between your standard Google English to Chinese. I'll just put
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
good morning, Jim. How are you? And then see what it is. And then if I can't quite figure out how this works, then I have a program which, and I don't remember the name of it. It's an app that
Mhm.
is a translation program that takes apart the words
Oh,
and tells you how they're constructed and where they came from. Many German words like theater. I'm sorry, many Chinese words like theater are in fact two characters. The Chinese love to double and triple things up, and breaking down the characters is helpful in trying to figure out what's going on. And so I have a program that does that very nicely and gives me samples of. So I know I go back and forth. I go into that, and then going into that program then often leads me into other things. I say, oh, that's interesting. In the middle of these three is finger. Why should that be? And then I'll,
my
so
brain
I'm
works the
trying to
same
build
way.
structures.
Yeah.
But
I got-
it's
No, in fact, I just feel like I've been doing the same thing with German because I feel like I want to be able to, but now I haven't been able to go back there for a year to actually get it in practice on the streets. But I've been working on Duolingo, which has really helped me read it. I mean, I can read pretty fluently now.
yeah. Well, that's my case too. I read German. I can speak it haltingly, but I don't get enough practice. It's very
Yeah.
hard if you're not actually living there.
Oh,
Uh,
and the grammar.
and
Just, yeah.
Even now, although I've done this for years, I still struggle in the theater if they're going fast,
Yeah.
or God help me if they're doing a Swabian accent or something. Then
Oh, I know. Yeah.
there's no hope at all.
I heard that when Brecht wanted to get Weigel, when they were rehearsing Mother Courage, that there was somebody else in the company that he could speak, the sort of the Bavarian, the dialect that Weigel could understand because she was Austrian.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this reminds me of an experience I once had in the theater. I was in German theater. I was, I saw a production of Hamlet. I don't even remember who this was anymore. And I was going with John Rouse. I don't know if you ever met him, but he was one time president of the American Brecht Society, where you might have run across him. He's retired now, but he used to teach out in Southern California. Anyway, he and I used to go to the Berlin Theatertreffen yearly, and I remember we'd just seen and his German was vastly better than mine.
Yeah.
And we were watching a Hamlet production, and everybody in the audience found Polonius just hysterically funny. And I couldn't see. I mean, you know how Polonius is.
Yeah.
He's a little silly and so on. And I said, "What? I don't. There's some joke here." He says, "Oh, it's his Swabian accent." So there you
I get it. I
have
get it. You know, I can tell when I look at the Berliner Ensemble film of the Mother Courage, and the actor who is playing the chaplain, I know he's funny. I just, have to go, okay, I got to adjust this. If I'm going to make the chaplain funny, I see why they put Gene Wilder in that part.
I remember that. Oh, speaking of John, I must tell you a parallel story.
Okay.
John, it was a great wit. And I remember once we were seeing Midsummer Night's Dream together in South Berlin. And they were doing the rude mechanical scene. This is a very German situation. I mean, this is the kind of thing you see on the German stage, but not on the American stage. And that is the actor who was playing Wall could not remember to stand still. He would wander over and watch other actors and so on. And Peter Quince became more and more angry and saying, "Look, you're the Wall. You must stay over there." And finally, after this had happened 2 or 3 times, I forget which one of the rude mechanicals is a carpenter. And he goes to the carpenter and takes his little carpenter's apron and the hammer and nails, and he literally nails Wall's foot literally nails it to the floor. It's a very German idea.
I hope they kept it in the production. It sounds wonderful.
Oh, it was a wonderful brand. I could probably look it up where it was. But the Germans always do a wonderful job with Midsummer Night's Dream. I've never seen a bad production because there's so many things you can do with it.
Wow.
One time, I talk in 10,000 Nights about Karen Byers, done with people speaking several different languages in Midsummer Night's Dream, which is wonderful production. Anyway, we had this moment, and the audience is a little bit shocked at this. John leaned over to me and said, "It's not a good idea to be a Wall in Berlin."
Marvin, I think that is the best punchline that you could come up with, and I will remember that. And it's going to be
all right
for us to make our way out of here too. As again, it's very painful for me to have to stop this conversation because I've just enjoyed visiting with you so much, and I hope other people have too. I will send you the tape of and the script for your.
Okay, Jim, that'd be great.
Okay, and you take care of yourself. And I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks, I hope.
Let's hope so. Okay.
Yes.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. You're welcome. Bye-bye now.
Coming by. For they can get from Mother Courage boots they can march in till they die. You know your men do not adore you.
Packs on their backs, lice in their hair.
But it's to death they're marching for you.